Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Paul, if I can start, why isn't the existing energy system built for decentralization in your sort of perspective? And can you then also explain how you guys are trying to change that from ENODA's perspective?
Certainly, thank you very much. It's a great question. If we go back all the way to the beginning, 140 years ago, when we invented the electricity system, the brilliance that Nikola Tesla and William Stanley had was that you could have a system that was extremely efficient and required extremely narrow operating parameters, but it could trivially achieve those parameters because at the top of the system was a big spinning power station.
Right.
So in the original system, our behavior was very synchronized. We ate dinner at the same time. We watched the same television.
Yeah.
We didn't 140 years ago, but we did 50 years ago.
At some point.
At some point.
Yeah.
We behaved the same way, and the generation came from large power plants that could easily adjust their output. So the power plant provided two things. It provided power, but it also provided system stability. And it provided system stability so effectively and so transparently that we forgot it did that.
Yeah.
So now with the energy transition, we replace the primary power with renewables, which provide primary power more cheaply than fossil fuels ever could, but they don't provide that core system stability. And we need to move system stability to somewhere else in the system if we're really going to achieve those objectives of net zero 2050 and 100% renewable energy.
Right, and what role is ENODA playing in sort of like shifting the technologies there?
So we have a platform of technologies that begins with something called the ENODA Prime Exchanger, which is a replacement for the distribution substation. That's the box at the end of your road that says, "Do not open, danger of death," and supports 100 houses with single-phase power. What's in that box today fundamentally is a transformer that's a design that's almost 140 years old, and it isn't able to accommodate power flowing back upstream. It isn't able to accommodate different numbers of electric vehicles and solar roofs on different phases. Our device replaces that and deconstrains that local network, and then a fleet of those devices coordinate to manage our load and provide the same services that power plants did previously. So once we move to a system with a high number of ENODA prime exchangers, a fleet of prime exchangers, it no longer requires gas-fired power stations or biomass-fired power stations or batteries to stabilize the grid. The grid can stabilize itself much more cost-effectively and without carbon emissions.
Yeah, it sounds groundbreaking if I hear it like that, and it also sort of like shows the rigidness of systems that we come from, right? It's like what we sort of like routine-wise from time have grounded ourselves in, and then we don't sort of question like, does that fit the time that we're in right now? So you're mentioning a couple of things that you guys are doing at ENODA. Would you say that those are like the most important shifts in innovations that are needed to sort of like enable decentralized energy?
I think so. I mean, I think the way that I would think about this is the first phase of the energy transition was about the key question of, can we build renewables quickly and cheaply? And we know that today the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But the first phase of the energy transition has been a little bit like the beginning of the internet. You know, back in the days when I still had hair, I wrote software in .com 1.0. And in .com 1.0, we said, you know, we have the browser at one end, we have the web at the other, but in between is Alexander Graham Bell. And to really unlock the internet, we needed to replace that middle piece with internet routing. Today in the energy transition, we have utility scale solar and wind at one end. We have heat pumps and electric vehicles and solar roofs at the other. But in between is Nikola Tesla, William Stanley, and George Westinghouse. And the next phase of the transition is not about can we build renewables, it's about can we build a system that will operate with those renewables.
And without them in the middle right there as an intermediary. That's an interesting one. So like, I mean, when we talk about this, I mean, the energy transition in a way, it's also oftentimes linked to rising costs, right? What would you say is the real sort of like costs that are related to energy security? Because at the end of the day, that's also like the ultimate aim through which we sort of like want to achieve this.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, we talk often about how renewables can be the gateway for energy security, and they can, but not with the grid we have today. And the reason for that is that the price that we pay isn't a function of the cheapest generation, it's a function of the most expensive that's needed to stabilize the grid. And that most expensive generation today is coming from natural gas or biomass or another form of peaking power that's extremely expensive. And I think as we look at the possibility of peace in Ukraine, the possibility of Russian gas restarting, we need to bear in mind that utilizing those resources again is going to leave us in the same position where our economic security is tied to the cost of that natural gas that balances the system. We have a paper that we've been sharing with people here at Energy Transition Dialogue, looking at how the cost of energy changes with rising level of renewables.
Right.
And what we see is that around 40 or 50%, the cost of stabilizing the system with existing technologies starts to rise exponentially.
Yeah.
So we really need a different type of grid, not just a bigger grid, to enable this transition.
Yeah, you're basically saying focusing on renewables alone is not enough. We need a way more diversified approach in that sense.
Yeah, renewables were the first enabling technology, but they're not the only enabling technology.
Yeah.
And they need a system that's built around them, whereas today we're shoehorning renewables into a system that was built for thermal generation.
Right, indeed, and that's the shift that we need to make. If we sort of like imagine a fully decentralized energy system of the future, what would that sort of look like in your ideal image, and what roles would renewables then play in that sort of like subset?
Certainly, I mean, the role is enormous, obviously, but what does a fully decentralized energy system mean? What I think it means is from anywhere to anywhere, and agnostic to the nature of supply and demand. So there's a concept in the European Union of energy communities, which is a beautiful concept. The idea that each community can think about what are the best resources for its needs. It can integrate renewables. It can integrate renewables with local heating or cooling or other priorities. Unfortunately, the grids we have today can't work that way. Yeah. We need to produce a dramatic increase in flexibility in the grid itself so that individuals, businesses, communities can make the energy choices they want about generation, about storage, about consumption, without being hamstrung by the very narrow operating parameters of our current grid.
Right, right. And I mean, it is a big sort of like step and skill that we then need to make, but I do hear you say that that it's one worth walking towards. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, we have a big round of applause, everyone, for Paul Domjan. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thanks.